You know, in the 18th century, the entire world map got a serious makeover. One nation, this relatively small island, somehow went from being just a regional player to the undisputed superpower of the whole planet. Today, we're going to break down exactly how Great Britain pulled that off. All right, let's get into it.
So really, how did they do it? How does an island nation end up running a global empire? One so big that famously the sun never set on it? Well, the answer isn't some single magic moment. It's actually a story about a century-long brutal struggle.
And that right there is the heart of our story. See, Britain's rise to the top wasn't some solo climb. It was a relentless, high-stakes duel with its greatest rival, France. And this rivalry, it would define an entire era and literally shape the world we live in today. But before Britain could even dream of taking on the world, it had to get its own house in order. The real foundations of its empire weren't laid on some distant battlefield, but through some incredibly smart politics and diplomacy right at home. It all kicked off with two, frankly, brilliant strategic moves. First, in 1707, the Acts of Union brought England and Scotland together, creating a solid, politically stable home base. You absolutely need that if you're going to project power overseas. Then, the Treaty of Utrecht in 1715, well, it didn't just end a war, it was designed to leave Britain's rivals totally exhausted and unable to keep up. This was a total masterclass in the main European strategy of the time, maintaining a balance of power. The goal wasn't just to win, it was to make sure no single country could become a mega-bully and dominate everyone else. The Treaty of Utrecht did this perfectly, leaving Britain kind of holding all the cards while its rivals had to go home and lick their wounds. Okay, so with the home front secure, Britain was ready for the main event, a global showdown with France. And this wasn't just another little European squabble. Oh no, this was a competition for the entire world. And this isn't just our take. The source material is crystal clear on this. This rivalry was the absolute engine of 18th century geopolitics. Pretty much every major war, every big treaty, every colonial adventure, you can see it all through the lens of this constant competition. And just look at what was on the line here. We're talking about vast colonial territories, total control of the seas, and the keys to the most profitable trade routes on the planet. The fighting wasn't just in Europe either. It was happening in North America, in India, in the Caribbean. This was a fight for the whole planet. This really sets up the classic strategic matchup, doesn't it? Britain's superpower was its navy, which gave it control over the oceans and global markets. France, on the other hand, had the most feared land army in Europe. It was the ultimate clash of sea power versus land power. After simmering for decades, this rivalry finally boiled over into a massive, decisive war. Many historians today call the 7 Years' War the very first true world war, and it was the absolute climax of this 100-year duel. And listen, you really can't overstate how important this war was. This was it, the final round. The winner wouldn't just win the rivalry, they would basically get to write the rules for the new global order. The stakes couldn't have been higher. So let's break down how it all went down. In North America, Britain just crushed the French colonial threat. In South Asia, British forces booted the French out of India. Now, the war in Europe itself was more of a messy stalemate, but here's the crucial point. In the places that really mattered for building a global empire, the colonies, Britain won. And they won big. The whole thing wraps up in 1763 with the Treaty of Paris. This was a landmark deal that completely redrew the world map, and it was all in Britain's favor. And the prizes Britain walked away with? I mean, they were staggering. Britain got Canada and all the French land east of the Mississippi River. It got Florida from Spain. Just like that, in one single treaty, France was basically knocked off the board as a major colonial player in North America and India. Britain was now, without a doubt, the world's #1 superpower. But the story doesn't stop there, because here's where things get kind of ironic. Just a little over a decade later, Britain has a massive new problem on its hands, the American Revolution. And guess who saw this as the perfect chance for a little payback? Yep, its old rival, France. Now, you might think France jumped in to help the American colonists because they loved the ideals of liberty and revolution. But nope, their motive was way simpler and a lot more practical. Pure, cold-blooded revenge for that humiliating loss in the 7 Years' War. The French plan was dead simple. Step 1, team up with the American rebels. Step 2, pour in tons of money and military support.
Step 3, sit back and watch your biggest rival get weaker. And you know what? On the surface, it totally worked.
But it turned out to be a classic Pyrrhic victory. That's a win that costs you so much, it's pretty much the same as a defeat. Helping America win its independence would end up bankrupting France, and, ironically, would light the fuse for its own revolution.
The economic fallout really tells the whole story. Sure, the war put a strain on Britain, but its global trade machine kept on humming. France, on the other hand, was economically devastated. So, ironically, by getting its revenge, France crippled itself, which only cemented Britain's position as the world's top economic power. So, when all the dust finally settled on this 100-year fight, a new world order had definitely emerged. The duel was over, and there was one clear winner left standing.
The final outcome was British preeminence. Britain stood alone as the dominant power in Europe and across the globe, a position it would keep for the next 100 years. And for France, the outcome was decline. It had lost its most important colonies, its global influence was a shadow of its former self, and its economy was in absolute ruins, which led straight to the French Revolution.
So the big takeaway is this. Through that long, brutal duel, Britain had grabbed all the key ingredients for a global empire. It had huge territories, it controlled the most important trade routes, and it had a navy that nobody could challenge. This set the stage perfectly for the 19th century's Pax Britannica, the long era of British peace.
But all of this leaves us with a final, really critical question. The rise of this empire obviously reshaped the world and created incredible wealth and power, but for whom and at what price? It forces you to ask, what is the true cost of building a global empire?